Good evening. In the 60s paranoia film classic 7 Days in May, it was the military taking over the civilian government. In the reality of 2006, it's not 7 days in May, but 6 generals in April. They fear one civilian has taken over the military with disastrous consequences for the nation and for its fighting men. Our fifth story on the countdown, they say Rumsfeld must go. The president today insists he must stay. The political battle over the Pentagon is joined. The only voice that really matters, still declaring his captaincy of Team Rumsfeld. The president denying in a statement this afternoon that his defense secretary has mismanaged the war in Iraq. Quoting, "I have seen firsthand how Don relies upon our military commanders in the field and at the Pentagon to make decisions about how best to complete these missions. Secretary Rumsfeld's energetic and steady leadership is exactly what is needed at this critical period. He has my full support and deepest appreciation." Mr. Bush apparently issuing his atypical statement in response to increasing calls for the secretary's resignation. As we mentioned, it's now 6 former military commanders saying it is time for Rumsfeld to go. But in an interview that aired today on Al Arabiya television, Mr. Rumsfeld replying that he intends to stick around as long as the president still wants him to.
The fact that 2 or 3 or 4 retired people have different views, I respect their views, but obviously if out of thousands and thousands of admirals and generals, if every time 2 or 3 people disagreed, we changed the Secretary of Defense of the United States, it would be like a merry-go-round.
Say this about him, he always still gives good soundbite. The Sayonara 6, however, not men who can be easily dismissed nor ignored, with any number of stars and stripes among them having accumulated vast experience on the ground in Iraq. Retired Army Major General John Riggs, the most recent to step forward, former director of the Objective Force Task Force. He is saying that Rumsfeld helped create an atmosphere of arrogance among the Pentagon's top civilian leadership. Retired General Charles Swanwick, who led troops on the ground in Iraq as recently as 2004 as commander of the Army's 82nd Airborne, also saying yesterday that he believes Rumsfeld has micromanaged his generals in the field, only taking their advice when it suits his own agenda. Also on the list, retired Major General John Batiste, the former commander of the Army's 1st Infantry Division in Iraq. Retired Lieutenant General Greg Newbold of the Marines, Director of Operations for the Joint Chiefs of Staff from 2000 to 2002. Retired Marines General Anthony Zinni, the former head of U.S. CENTCOM, and retired Army Major General Paul Eaton, who commanded the training of Iraqi security forces until 2004. One of those 6, General Batiste, saying this morning that one reason so many are now raising questions about Mr. Rumsfeld's leadership is a new book, Cobra II, the inside story of the invasion and occupation of Iraq. Its co-author, our old friend, retired Marine Corps Lieutenant General Bernard Traynor, one of the most cogent and no-nonsense of our analysts here on MSNBC in the weeks and months following the start of action in Iraq. Kind enough to join us again now. General, welcome back to the program.
Thanks. Good to be here.
How do you come down on the matter of Donald Rumsfeld's career prospects at the Pentagon? Might you be General number 7?
No, I'm not going to fall in that category. The president makes his secretary, and he's stuck with him for better for worse. But the interesting thing, and I don't know if the president recognizes this, but up until this point, the battle has been between the generals and the Secretary of Defense. But now the president himself has put himself right in the middle of the target zone. And a lot of people are going to be saying, particularly I think the opposition party, is that, well, why did the president tolerate this guy? And he's going to get a lot of the blame, which up to this point has been dumped on Rumsfeld. And you have to say to yourself, this is kind of unprecedented to have all these generals doing a post-mortem and showing their frustration and agony. And so you have to say to yourself, well, if there's smoke, there's got to be some fire there somewhere.
Ultimately, is the commander-in-chief chiefly in command? In other words, how much of this blame now focused on Mr. Rumsfeld might be better focused on the president or either of the last 2 secretaries of state?
Well, I think the president, I think, is now going to get a great deal of criticism, I think, from the Democrats, because it has expanded beyond the Secretary of Defense. But the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor were largely in the process of building up for the operation in Iraq, cut out of the picture. Rumsfeld was the guy that controlled everything. He controlled the information. He controlled the decisions. The post-Saddam period was not going to be something that the State Department would do, which you thought a State Department would do in terms of reconstruction. No, he was going to do it all. And Condi Rice, who was the National Security Advisor, and Colin Powell, the Secretary of State, were pretty much cut out of the whole thing. Everybody other than than Rumsfeld, the President, and the Vice President, Dick Cheney, were pretty much in the outer corridors. The decisions were made by the Troika, joined at the hip there in the administration.
To your book, Cobra 2, and the research that went into it, the President's statement today that, quote, I have seen firsthand how Don relies upon our military commanders in the field and at the Pentagon to make decisions about how best to complete these missions, something he has asserted in one way or the other many times, and yet in your book you write that intelligence warnings about the roots of the insurgency were ignored, that the war was not run from the field, it was run from Washington and CENTCOM. Where is the disconnect? How is it possible that two completely different views of reality could exist simultaneously about the same war?
Well, you have to understand the way things were run. The things were run out of the Department of Defense under Rumsfeld. He had a vision, as did the others in the top level of the administration, as to what the reality was. And the reality was that the regime would fall very quickly, and we would be in and we would be out very quickly, and that the Iraqis would pick up the pieces with the support of the international community. That was the assumption, and that they anticipated that just a small number of forces with a transformed modern army would be able to do the job very quickly, and they overlooked the fact that there's something that comes after the war, that we are going to be stuck with the business of the security and the stability within Iraq. They rejected that. The administration rejected that idea. That was not the focus of their attention. So the assumptions that they made, which they never adjusted throughout the war, looking for a Plan B in case those assumptions were wrong, came back to bite them, and to bite the United States with a lot of casualties ever since. And I think this is the thing that frustrated a lot of the American military leaders. And they're speaking up now because they've seen 3 years of misjudgments leading to terrible agony for the U.S. military, lots of troops being killed, and the prestige in the United States being besmirched. And I think Cobra 2 it certainly was unintended, but each of them saw the problem within their own slice of the action, their own stovepipe. But when they read Cobra 2, they saw that this misjudgment and these poor assumptions were across the board, and I think a lot of them, that prompted them in their agony of the post-period for the last 3 years to speak out.
Retired Marine Corps Lieutenant General Bernard Traynor, great thanks once again for your time, sir.
Great to be with you.
Now, Donald Rumsfeld still has his job entirely the president's choosing, Mr. Rumsfeld having already submitted his resignation twice, President Bush refusing to accept it on both occasions.